In this video, I briefly outline some core skills in Excel using a worked example. You will get all the handouts and the analysis on GitHub. The description is down below. If you have any questions, just leave a comment down below and I will get back to you as soon as possible. I use data provided in various company reports by McDonald's. Sadly, McDonald's does not report all these figures consistently after 2013, but it gives you a sense of how the business has developed in this time period. The first thing we notice is that there is a difference in reporting. And after 2008, they only report franchised restaurants as one category. So in order to compare these different forms of reporting, we have to generate here the sum of these two subcategories. So how do we do this? We move to the cell and we type in equal to, and that initializes basically the option to use now cell references. I click on the first cell I want to use, so I want to use the franchise restaurants. I add the one below, affiliated restaurants, and I would just use enter, and I have now here the combined number of franchised restaurants. And what you can do is, you see in the corner this little box, and you can just use your left mouse click and you drag it along. And this will fill all these cells with the sum of the two cells below. Yeah, we can just check this, so we just move to the next one and the next one. And you see it always adds up the two cells below. Yeah, so that is working quite nicely. What we have done here is the following. By referring to the cells below and dragging them by one cell to the right, we moved the references as well. Yeah, and this is called a relative cell reference. So that's a relative cell reference. That's the first thing we should note. Then when you click on these cells, do a right click and you go to format cell, you see different types of formats we use. Yeah, in this particular case, for instance, we want to have a number. We might use a separator for 1000. It's quite common for financial data. Yeah, but of course we can also change this into, for instance, a currency if we wish to, and so on. But it's always good to check your format and to maybe adjust this to display the format you want to display. So now we already have seen the relative references at play. Another way to do exactly what we have done is to use formulas. So we can just remove that for a second and now use again equal to, and then we use the sum, which is a built-in formula. And you see now, once we put the first bracket, you get here a help function opening, and you can now specify the things you want to add, and you separate using a comma. So we have the first and the second cell. Again, I use the relative references, and we achieve the same outcome here as well. The other thing which is useful to understand is an absolute reference. So how do I do an absolute reference? Now that is useful if you do not want this equation to move to the next cell after dragging it. So here, of course, if we drag, we move to the next one, and we would add up the next figures. If you want to, for instance, fix these here after specifying it, you just click on the first one and you hit F4. This gives you an absolute reference, and you do the same for the second one. And now when you drag it, it will maintain the same number, because now we have an absolute reference. Yeah, so using F4, you can achieve that right away. But what you see in terms of the notation, we have now a $sign indicating that we fix our reference. Yeah? And you can fix references according to 2 dimensions. The first one is your column, the second one is your row. So we fix both in this case, row and column. Yeah? We can of course now play around and see what happens if we change that. So if we, for instance, now only fix the row, we can do this, and we have a flexible first column. We see now what happens if we do that and drag it on. The same happened what happened before. Now the references of course move to the next column, but they would not move if we move the row. So for instance, I could copy paste that up here and it would still work. It would maintain the same column but would change the row. Yeah? So whenever I want to move it up and down, it would still maintain the same value because I fixed the row but I didn't fix the column. So once you have a combination of no dollar sign and a dollar sign, we call this a mixed cell reference. Good, so now let's get back into it and just complete the task. So I go back in here, and of course here having a relative reference makes perfect sense. So we have completed that. Then we want to have here the total number of restaurants. Well, again, I can use a sum for this. I use my own operated restaurants and the franchised ones and combine the two. And down below I can, for instance, now also determine the growth rate of the total number of restaurants. This gives you an indication of how quickly you add new restaurants. So how can I determine a growth rate? Well, if I look at 98, I could do the following. I now use brackets for that. So I can look at the change of restaurant. So this is this current value minus the previous value divided by the previous value. So this would give me a change of the restaurant, which would be a growth rate. So that's one way to do it. And you see here it pops up as a %. So if you do a right click on this format cell, again we can modify this. So here I have a percentage. It might be also a general format to start with, but actually having a % makes sense for a growth rate. And again we can now drag this along, and because we use here a relative reference, it of course updates our calculation as you would hope to do so. So now we have the growth rates shown, and that might be interesting to observe further. So now we can go into some visualization. So we can just mark this. So I go into the first cell, I press Ctrl Shift, and then I use the right arrow, and this will mark all the adjacent cells. So now we marked all the growth rates. Then I go to Insert, and here I have various options for visualization. You can, for instance, ask for a recommended chart if you want that. Let's see what happens here. So they propose certain layouts. We can of course use a column chart, that's fine, but actually it would be nicer to have a line chart. So you see line charts are here. For a time series it makes sense to have a line chart, so we use the line chart. And now we have our first figure. We can move it to places where we like. We could also move it into a separate worksheet. That's also a possibility. So we can change that and we can move it. So you see here move chart, and we might do a new sheet and we just say this is our figure 1. Yeah, that might be useful. And now we have figure 1 generated. And here we might modify the title. We just say this is growth rates, and we now do a right click on this to select data and modify our horizontal axis. We just click up here, click at this icon, and then we go back to our handout and do the range of years and click back at the icon. So that should store this, and just say OK. And now you see a change of the horizontal axis, so that is quite useful. And of course now we can do some further edits. You can play around with yourself. We could also change the layout of this chart if we want to. There are various options already displayed. This looks pretty useful. And we can also change the setting for the line. You just do a right click on it and you can format this series as you wish. Yeah, you can change, of course, colors. You can change the type of line you want. You can add different features into it if you wish to do so. Let's just change maybe the color, go to a slightly darker color. Yeah, this of course can now be exported and used in maybe a PowerPoint presentation or Word or in any other yeah, word processing software. Good, so that's the main thing I wanted to show. In the full analysis I have done more of it, but it's using the same principle, so feel free to work through this. Again, if you have any questions, let me know in comments below. I see